no confirmation if the Hamas delegation has arrived in Riyadh, but leaders from the two rival Palestinian factions are expected in Riyadh this week. And for the first time, Iran's president has been speaking directly to Palestinians in Gaza. On Friday, Ibrahim Raisi called on Gazans to press on with their armed struggle against Israel. To break it all down for us, we're joined in the studio by our correspondent Hamda Salhout. Hamda, Fatah and Hamas are still bitter rivals, aren't they, despite numerous efforts to reconcile. Do you think Abbas and Haniyeh will be meeting face-to-face in Riyadh this week?
It's really unclear. It's unclear if the two are going to meet. The last time they met was last summer in Algeria after months of facilitation by the Algerian government to try and get them both in the same room. And what came out of that meeting was actually something everyone has seemed to forget about, which was the agreement of new Palestinian Authority elections this coming December. We'll see if that's going to happen. We haven't heard from Saudi Arabia if we're going to see a meeting between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. There have been so many failed attempts at reconciliation between the two. The last really big meeting happening in 2020. Gazans will tell you that they don't really have any hope. Remember how Hamas took over the Gaza Strip in 2007, described as a bloody coup by a lot of experts. It's really unclear if they're going to meet and what's going to come of that. Saudi Arabia did invite Mahmoud Abbas weeks ago for this iftar, and the Hamas delegation is doing a religious pilgrimage in Mecca, but they are expected to meet with some officials while they're on the trip.
Yeah, there are a lot of diplomatic shifts going on in the region right now. Saudi Arabia is reconciling with Iran following that deal brokered by China, just as Iran, as we just saw, is trying to mend its ties with Hamas. Does all of this mean a perfect storm is brewing for Israel?
That really could be the case. Saudi Arabia is also trying to warm its ties with Hamas. They're the ones who invited them. They haven't really had great ties since 2007. They've actually been arresting Hamas operatives in their country. And since Hamas signaled this shift that they want to perhaps reconcile with Saudi Arabia, they've been releasing some of those prisoners. Iran addressing the Gazan people on Al-Quds Day on Friday, telling them to bolster their resistance, kind of taking a jab at the Palestinian Authority. But what Iran is also doing is trying to put Israel in a tough spot, because you have Iranian militias in Lebanon, in Syria. You have entrenchment of Iran in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip. So Iran is really monopolizing and taking a power grab on the situation, showing Israel and showing the West that they're creating a new world order, and they're going to do whatever it takes to kind of divert whatever influence they had here. And what it means for Israel, well, Saudi Arabia and Israel, we do know wants those ties with Saudi Arabia, but the Crown Prince has signaled that he's not there yet because of the ongoing violence and because of the increasingly volatile situation with the Palestinians.
Hamda, thank you very much. Hamda Salhout there. Well, along with healing rifts with Hamas and Iran, Saudi Arabia is also pushing for the Arab world to reintegrate Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. It's a far cry from what Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised to do when he took office, that is secure a normalization agreement with Riyadh. To talk more about that, we're joined by Jonathan Shan, Senior Vice President for Research at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Just last week, of course, Israel was under attack on multiple fronts, and now we see Saudi Arabia apparently embracing all of Israel's enemies. Are you concerned?
Look, I think it certainly should be concerning for everyone who's looking for stability in the region. One would have hoped that we would have seen pragmatic states like Saudi Arabia, along with the UAE, Bahrain, and others, condemning the Iranian axis. Instead, what we see is a warming toward the Iranian axis. As you mentioned, the normalization with Syria, the outreach to Hamas. And then, of course, the Fatah faction is somewhere in the middle of all of this. It's not quite a pragmatic actor. It's not quite a radical actor here, but certainly an enemy of stability in the region. So I think a lot of change is happening here right now. And as noted in previously, it's happening in the shadow of the new agreement between China and Iran and Saudi Arabia. So certainly everything seems to be upside down in the region as opposed to, let's say, 3 months ago.
Right. Well, and compared to a year ago, it seems to be completely turned on its head, doesn't it? We just had the first round of the Negev Forum, the follow-up to the Abraham Accords. There was supposed to be another round of talks this year. Are the Abraham Accords going into reverse?
I don't think they're going into reverse. I mean, I think we saw some, I think very solid messaging coming out of the UAE, Bahrain, and I think, even Morocco is still holding strong. Sudan obviously is going through some internal turmoil, and I think its fate remains to be seen. But I think the real story here is that the region just 2 years ago was on the precipice of what appeared to be peace breaking out across all of these various actors, with Saudi Arabia at the front of the line. 2 years on, after Biden administration policy signaling that it's perhaps leaving the Middle East, wagging its finger at various actors for transgressions real and imagined, it now appears that the Biden administration has lost the region. They're turning towards Russia. They're turning towards China. They don't seem to be as interested in working with Israel. And I think this is ultimately on the Biden administration's shoulders for having eroded a significant opportunity in the Middle East.
Well, is it that, or is it just that the Arab states have decided to look after their own interests first? We're seeing a prisoner exchange underway in Yemen. We're seeing the Arab countries embrace Bashar al-Assad, having accepted that they can't beat him. I mean, is this entirely down to a failure of US leadership, or is it just these Arab countries looking out for their own interests?
Well, I think there's a question of what is in their own interest. Is it normalizing with a genocidal regime in Syria that is partnering with an Iranian regime that is destabilizing the region? It's hard to see how this is ultimately benefiting the region. There could be hedging, of course, that's going on, and I think many of the Gulf Arab states are known to do exactly that. They will move with the political wind. But I do see that the lack of American leadership, largely speaking, has hurt the cause of normalization and stabilization. One could also argue, of course, that some of the turmoil that we've seen in Israel since the new government of Benjamin Netanyahu has taken over has not exactly projected stability either. So perhaps those two things coupled together, the lack of American leadership and the instability in Israel, perhaps have turned off some of these Arab states. But they are clearly hedging, and it is a backslide without question from where we were 2 years ago.
Jonathan Shan, sir, at the FDD, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.